Here we go with chapter 24, called the Sacrifice chapter. The conductor looked at Medi. Almost wouldn't have recognized you without that fancy getup of yours, he said. Then he glanced at the others. No Milo? No Milo, Medi confirmed. He's at camp. He couldn't come up to help Marzana out, so we decided to send me. But you haven't met. She reached back and grabbed Marzana's hand. This is Marzana. She knows the Pines and Clem and Georgie, and that's Nyala, Amelia, JJ, and Ciro. Marzana reached back for Ciro's wrist and tugged him forward. Ciro's how we found this place, she said. Ciro del Olmo, his grandfather, designed a bunch of the stations. No kidding, Brandon said. Patrick was your grandfather? Ciro nodded, with just a touch of awe in his expression. Yeah, did you know him? Met him once, right about when I took over the trains from the previous conductor. About 6-7 years ago, that would have been. Brandon paused. Ailing then, I think he was. Probably, Ciro said quietly. He died when I was 7. Brandon clapped him on the shoulder. I'd have liked to have known him better. Glad to meet you, mate. He cleared his throat and his eyes returned to Medi. So, why am I here now? Medi turned pointedly to Marzana. Well, technically, I think you were here because Amelia hit the wrong button. Marzana admitted, but Milo told me about you. I called him to find out how to get a hold of you. Well, you got me. Congratulations, Brandon said with a smile, though Marzana thought it held a trace of wariness. It made sense that the below ground still ran, even in its minimal way, wasn't supposed to be common knowledge after all. What can I do for you? We can keep the secret, Marzana said, I promise, but this is important. You took Emmett Sybok to my parents earlier this week because of a kidnapping. Brandon hesitated, probably trying to figure out which name to use. Barbara and Peter Hacklebaron's daughter, Marzana finished for him. Yes, and they're down in the city proper right now, talking with Emmett and whoever else is in charge of the investigation because they think they found Peony Hyde, the girl who was taken. She took a deep breath and plunged on. But they're wrong, and right now Peony is still out there waiting to be found, and we think we know where she is. Brandon put his hands on his hips. And you need a ride where? Where? That was the question, wasn't it? Marzana hesitated. She glanced back at the rest of the knot, but Nyala, Ciro, JJ, and Amelia stood quietly behind her on the platform, waiting for her to answer. Marzana was in charge. She had the final say about what, when, and how they tagged the adults in. Well, this was it. What she should do was ask Brandon to take them to the station closest to a police precinct in the city proper. Anyone would probably do. Once they were above ground in the city, Ciro's phone would work, and she could use the contact numbers she was pretty sure she had somewhere among the photographed notes. If nobody answered, she had Emmett's name and the name of his police contact, Thad, and anybody official ought to be able to track one or the other of them down. But on the other hand, here they were, already underground with the train ready to go. And if they were right, the answer to everything was also underground. Peony might even be underground. Maybe that's what in the dark part of her message meant. Plus, Marzana reasoned, Brandon was an adult. If they managed to convince him to do what she wanted, he'd have to come. There would be some form of adult supervision. The kidnapped girl's house is pretty close to the intersection of Mergenthaler and Watermill Streets, Marzana said. That's where the abandoned Mergenthaler Street station is, right? Basically right under that intersection. And there's no entrance left up above? Brandon nodded. Yep, that's true enough. But if that's where you want to go, there's a bit of a complication. Nyala spoke up. The iron? Brandon tapped the side of his nose. All 8 transit tunnels in and out of Mergenthaler are cut off. That's why the city sold off the land above. There were so many breaks in the lines, so much interference, there was no getting it back. So the map back there is actually accurate, where the iron broke in and changed it? Amelia glanced over her shoulder at the mosaic on the wall. That can't be a coincidence. The conductor grinned. I wouldn't imagine it is, no. That's wild, Ciro muttered. Mess around in these tunnels long enough, you'll see wilder, Brandon turned back to Marzana. So, what is it you want? She took a deep breath. I don't know if you saw the news last night, but Peony's father withdrew from the mayor's race and the family left town. The house is empty. We think the kidnappers want them out so they could get at the station from above because they couldn't get in from any of the transit tunnels. We think that's where they are now. We want you to take us there. Peony may be with them. Given the teacups and animal sounds in Peony's message, Marzana thought that it was unlikely, but certainly there was a chance. You said there was a complication if we wanted to go there. You didn't say it was impossible. Is there another tunnel? One that isn't on the map? One that's unlikely anyone who wasn't, well, you would know about? Brandon considered her for a moment. Then he glanced at the others one by one before his gaze returned to Marzana. You say you can be trusted? And you vouch for everyone else? Absolutely, Marzana said without hesitation. The conductor looked at Medi. And you vouch for this girl, Witcher? For a moment, Marzana was thrown by the unfamiliar name. Then she remembered that, like her own parents, Medi had another name and another past. It felt a little like the way Victor Cormorant had used Marzana's mother's real name at the end of their interview the night before. I vouch for her, Medi said. All right, Brandon said briskly. Yes, there's another tunnel. Maintenance. It's not on any map I'm aware of, so I don't see how anyone but me would know about it, which makes me think your theory seems reasonable on the face of it. Only I am absolutely not just taking a handful of kids right in to confront a bunch of possible kidnappers, he added severely. Well, Marzana argued, but you'd be there, wouldn't you? Milo said you're a fighter. We wouldn't be alone. The more experienced you get at fighting, Brandon said grimly, the more you never ever want to have to rely on it in an actual altercation with stakes any higher than bragging rights. I'm not some kind of commando. But there's no time, Marzana insisted. Now that she'd convinced herself this was the most logical course of action, there was no way she was backing down. A girl's life is at stake. That was true, no matter where Peony was being held. They had to assume her life was in danger until she was safely home. Hang on, Mars, Nyla interrupted. I have an idea. Ciro and I'll go back above and track down your mom and dad. She turned to Ciro. If the contact numbers Marzana has don't work immediately, we can get your mom to help. We'll find the Hacklebarons or this Emmett guy or somebody, and we'll send them to the Hyde's house. They can meet you there, she said to Brandon. But this way, someone gets to the house as fast as possible. You good with that? She asked Ciro. A quick flash of regret flickered across his face, but it was like one of Amelia's smiles, there and gone before Marzana could be totally sure of what she'd seen. He cracked his neck and nodded. Let's do it. He turned to Amelia. But can your friends find us a phone so you guys can take mine? Might be good for nothing, but just in case. Barnaby and Enza should still be in the library, Amelia said. Tell them, or whoever's there, you need phones and privacy, and they'll get you what you need. Great. Ciro took Marzana's hand and put the phone in it. Here you go. This sounds suspiciously reasonable, Brandon said cautiously. Then you'll help us out? Marzana asked. Here's what I'll do. Brandon patted assorted pockets on his coveralls, then extracted a pad and a stub of pencil from one on his left leg. He jotted down a couple of lines, tore the page from the spiral binding, and passed it to Nyala. Marzana caught a glimpse of 2 names, followed by phone numbers. If you have any trouble getting a hold of Marzana's folks in Emmett, call these ladies. Brandon leaned over to point to the top line with his pencil. Georgie there is a good friend of Emmett's and might know how to find him. Clem is a good friend of hers. He'll call them. Heck, call them even if you don't have trouble. They'll be good backup to have. And if this doesn't turn out to be a total mare's nest, I'll feel better knowing we have backup. Tell them I told you to call. Give them the rundown and ask them if they can get to Mergenthaler and Watermill. Nyala saluted. Got it. She gave Marzana's hand a squeeze. You can do this. I can't wait to hear what happens. Then she hurried to the benches, where she collected her backpack and the tracing paper with the taped ransom note. Amelia followed her and gathered her own supplies, including the city map. There's a latch that lets the painting slide back, she said to Nyala. You can't miss it, but don't forget to listen before you open the panel. If the kid's singing, the coast is clear. If he's not, well, use your best judgment, she finished resignedly, shoving the tape and her flashlight into her bag, since somebody's in danger and all. She turned and hurried through the train door, probably before she could change her mind and beg Nyala and Ciro not to give away the secret under any circumstances. Nyala laughed. We'll do our best not to break your new toy. Then she headed for the stairs without looking back. Ciro shot Marzana a quick, encouraging smile, then followed close on Nyala's heels. Brandon rapped his knuckles on the metal above the open door. All aboard who's going, then. Medi all but skipped inside. JJ took a deep breath and lightly punched Marzana on the shoulder before darting through the door. But Marzana stared after the two heading up the interminable staircase as the reality of what she'd agreed to hit her all of a sudden. Wait, Nyala isn't coming. I'll be right back, she said to Brandon. Then she sprinted across the stairs and ran up 2 at a time. Nye, wait! Nyala and Ciro stopped a dozen steps up. What are you doing? Nyala demanded. Get going. I don't want you to miss anything, Marzana protested, twisting her fingers. We started this. We dreamed about this. Nyala shook her head. And we're still doing it. She reached for Marzana's hand. I'm going to do my part, but... She managed a pained smile. But look, this is the place in the story where one chapter has to get sacrificed so you can move on to the next. She lowered her voice. That guy isn't going to take you into the thick of things unless he thinks there'll be people there, adults, to handle any actual danger. It's a dead end. The adventure stops here if we don't find a way to get around that ending before it happens. Her smile deepened, and it's not like I'm having to throw myself into some big set of gears to pull off the sacrifice. I'm not a chapter that has to get cut up. I'm just going to make some phone calls, she patted her back pocket, and try to make sense of Peony's message. Ciro and I can give this new information to your folks along with everything else. Nyala managed to grin. Honestly, by the time you poor saps get to the station, the whole thing will probably be wrapped up and done. I'll be a hero, and you'll just be late. But Nyala was right, but it didn't matter. This was their adventure, whatever other strands they'd woven into it. Marzana and Nyala were the two ends of the knot. But you'll miss everything, Marzana said in a small voice. Nyala squeezed her hand, blinking hard. Not if you promise to tell me. Marzana nodded and squeezed back. You can do this, Nyala said again, so go do it. She disentangled her hand gently, turned away, and trotted toward the balcony and the staircase that rose up from it to disappear between the walls, leaving Ciro behind with Marzana. Hey, he said, you taking that there train? Marzana snorted and wiped her eyes. Guess I'd better go. Yeah, so 2 things. He tapped the phone in her hand. 1, use this if you need to. You may not have service, but if you do, don't hesitate. 2, he bent and kissed her cheek, right where it met with a corner of her mouth. Marzana stumbled backwards in pure surprise, and he grabbed her wrist to keep her from tumbling down the steps. That's for luck, he explained quickly. Good luck. Then he too rushed up the stairs and disappeared out of the view at the top. Marzana touched her cheek, then turned and ran down as fast as she could without tripping over her own, suddenly very clumsy feet. Let's go, she managed as she stepped past a silent, grinning Brandon and onto the train. So they're going to go find Peony, hopefully.